So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to a very strange battle replay because this one actually has me in it. So for once I'm actually going to be in one of my videos, which is kind of strange for recently, but I do want to get more involved with the process if possible, because obviously I can be more insightful about the battle if I was actually there and I'm not having to sort of piece it together as I go along with the audience. But yes, so I will be in this one, and I was playing as Khan, and there is a reason why the two factions that are facing off against each other are, because there is a new kind of unit that, you know, was intended to be shown off in this battle. Unfortunately, it does feature quite heavily, particularly late on. So we'll be having a look at all of those things, but first of all we'll go through my army composition. So I'm playing as Khan, obviously, so I've got some Nerniac Horse Archers, and I've got some Chieftain's Vanguard, which are the new, it's just a renamed Chieftain's Court. This is my General's Bodyguard unit. I've also got these Nurad Retainers, which are melee cavalry, to try and shield my Horse Archers from being sort of accosted by any sort of enemy cavalry, shock or melee. And then I've also got some Nomadic Scouts, which these guys are now axe-throwing cavalry. So in close range, these guys can really help tip a cav fight in your favour. And of course, Khans don't really need too much help to tip a cav fight in their favour, because all of their cavalry has got a bonus versus other cavalry. And then over here, if we go and have a look at what's left of my other parts of my cavalry, I've got one unit of Brotherhood of the Lance, which, you know, the Brotherhood of the Lance are the highest charge damage cavalry that Khan have. They aren't as durable as they once were, however, so you do need to be careful with them. However, they can still be used to devastating effect if used at the right time. You do need to be careful with them, otherwise they will fall apart quite quickly. I also have the Nurad Windblades, of course. In the last patch, they were probably the best cav-to-cav combat unit in the game, and I don't think that's changed. I think that still is a designation they hold, and they are being backed up by some Nomadic Scouts. There's also some Nerniac Horse Archers and some Nurad Retainers over here, so I've got some heavy cav presence on both flanks, of course. And then over here in the middle, I've got a line of 4 units of Nurad Footmen, of course. They're still going to be the most solid choice for Khan's main infantry line. A couple of units of Nomadic Axemen to back them up. I've also got a couple of units of the new Nurad Halberds. And back here we have the new type of unit which both factions on display have available to them, albeit different names, of course. We have the Brotherhood Shadowblades. So this is sort of the replacement for the Nurad Assassins of the last patch, which looked a little bit like rice farmers, but now they look like genuinely scary units. They have that twin blade, and we'll get on to a little bit about how these assassin type units are going to work as the battle goes along. But my opponent is JMonster, and a preview 1v1 for the sort of new patch is something that we've intended to do, I think, since August, back when Rudauer was first sort of envisioned. So yeah, it's been a long time in the making, this one. But again, similar to how I've got Nurad Footman at the front. Is it Nurad Footman again? Yes, Nurad Footman. Was wondering if they'd been renamed. He's got Flag Rim at the front, so quite similar in terms of infantry. But again, we'll go on to a little bit about how each of the infantry units will work as the fight goes on. He's also got Scion Rim, of course. The spears are going to make life pretty difficult for my cavalry to get in behind him. Again, he's got some Variag mercenaries. I don't have any foot archers that I've deployed, so he's got a nice foot archer contingent that can back up his line. And then back here, he's also got some Eastron clan warriors, which are, of course, just the clan warriors, only a little bit more fancy. And then over here, we've got some Scion Rim, and then he has also got some horse archers. So if we look over here, Rune, of course, have available to them the Variag mercenary riders, so he's answering my horse archers in kind. That's on the other flank as well, and also on the other flank he will have the runic war chariots. The chariots are potentially very deadly, because this is the 4th 1v1 of the sort of 4 that we did, and in one of them his chariots just ripped my line apart. It was a slaughter. So chariots should now be actually quite useful, provided they are sort of left to do their work, because obviously there aren't very many unit models, so they can be focused down quite easily. But it's a similar story on this front over here. So let's get going. Should obviously preface this by saying there were 3 battles before this, but they always went heavily in one favour or the other. So JMonster won twice before this, and I went infantry heavy with Khans twice, and the infantry just, it isn't good enough to go up against Rune. Like, if you're going to be Khan'd up against Rune, you really want to be leveraging your mounted units more heavily than anything else, simply because Rune's infantry is so much better. The one time I did win was when I did the Horse Archer Death Ball, where I just almost half my army, I would say, was entirely comprised of horse archers. And against the kind of build that he went for a rush-focused Rune build there. It really worked out quite well for me, and it went very heavily in my favour that time. But of course, you know, JMonster knows what he's doing more than me, so I'll take any victory I can get, to be honest. But yes, as we move into the battle, he's also got the Dragon's Wrath Guildsmen in his army, which are hidden because they are the assassin unit for Rune, so they've sort of been changed a little bit in how they work, because again, Rune didn't really need another heavy infantry unit, considering they've got so many. And the assassins are quite durable in and of themselves, and they do have a nice feature, which is, well, as the Horse Archer engagement gets underway over here, is my Horse Archers have got slightly more range than the runic ones, I believe. But the assassins have the ability to throw daggers. They have, I think, 2 volleys of daggers in them, so they've got a sort of ranged attack. Obviously, it's best if you can get it so that enemies advance into them while they're still hidden, and that will of course lead to them taking the full force of the dagger volley. This will also stagger the unit and allow the assassins to get a good engagement, preferable for them. And of course they are quite skillful as well, so that's something to be worth considering. But as we move in, I'll talk more about what my thinking was in this fight. So I didn't go really heavy on the Horse Archers this time. For Khand, like, I think I had 3 units of Horse Archers, which for Khand is not much at all. You know, I've got 2 units of Nerniag Horse Archers, which are the most durable of all my Horse Archers available. They are slightly more expensive than the other 2 sort of basic Horse Archers you get, but they are also able to take arrow fire a little bit better, which Horse Archers are quite weak to counter fire, so that's something that I did want to do. He's also got his Horse Archers shooting in a circle, which my Horse Archers can't do, interestingly enough, but I've never really found the circle formation to be all that effective anyway. It looks cool, and also obviously I've got my Chieftain's Vanguard, which are the elite Horse Archers. Something that is worth mentioning though, you know, obviously I needed to sort of refamiliarise myself with the plagues. I haven't really been involved with looking at the stats too much, sort of for quite a long time, to be honest with you. So Khand, weirdly, are the first faction that I'm going to be sort of that I've been looking at to sort of learn how to play, because obviously this was the matchup that was intended as the skirmish continues. I did notice that stuff like the really heavy runic cavalry, so the bodyguard and the dragon knights, they will stand up really, really well to the Horse Archers. So half the ammunition of a Chieftain's Vanguard is not enough to kill a single dragon knight, so you do need to pick your targets with Horse Archers quite carefully. But in this situation, Rune didn't bring any of their really heavy cavalry, because of course it is very expensive to bring that. And of course, Khan's melee cavalry are more than capable of destroying them in melee. Stuff like the wind blades and the retainers put together can really overwhelm and swamp them. So JMonster is going more defensive, which is understandable. Khand are definitely more aggressive, but I didn't bring up my infantry because in the matches that I lost, I did learn that Khan's infantry falls apart pretty dramatically if Rune are able to sort of do what they want to them, and I didn't want the runic war chariots to go up and down my lines while my cavalry was kept at arm's length by his range. Now his chariots are moving forward here to try and sort of stop my Horse Archers from firing. However, I'm also bringing in my Nurad retainers here to try and destroy them. So the chariots are now much, much better, I've noticed. They are... The problem that they always had was they died really, really quickly, and they still can die quite quickly, but relatively speaking, it's now much more difficult to just kill them really fast. In this situation though, initially victory seems certain against my Nurad retainers, but that should change pretty quickly. You can see one of the chariots has fallen, and on their own, unsupported, they are going to lose to melee cavalry like this. So again, one of the popular strategies with Khand that has been sort of prevalent thus far is going full Horse Archers, and I didn't want to do that because I feel as though JMonster would have seen that coming. So I wanted to go a little bit more melee cavalry to try and bog down some of his units, and obviously he's bringing out some Estron clan warriors over here. I'm trying to sort of send my nomadic scouts around the flank, which was probably a bit of a mistake, to be honest with you, because they are of course axe throwers. Their range is very, very small, and this means, and they don't have much armor at all. A lot of Khan's units are quite susceptible to ranged fire. There are some exceptions to that rule, of course. The Nurad footmen, the frontline unit, are very effective at dealing with that. But over here you can see that I've got my Nurad retainers coming in here to try and finish up these runic war chariots. Again, I saw how lethal the chariots were in one of the, let's call them, warm-up games. And I really wanted them out of the equation, because otherwise my infantry in the late game, when I intend to use them, would never really do much. And obviously my Brotherhood of the Lance have also come over here, getting a nice rear charge onto those clan warriors, killing a lot of them in one go. If we go back over to the other side, we can see that the Horse Archer engagement is still going on, but I have also moved up my Chieftain's Vanguard, my most elite Horse Archer, and my General's unit. But now all of the action is happening over here, so the Horse Archers... The Horse Archer advantage is always going to go to my favour in this situation, but if JMonster picks his targets right, like the Wind Blades are not going to be particularly good against ranged fire. You can see that what's left of his chariots have been pincered by my Windblades and my Brotherhood of the Lance. Brotherhood of the Lance are not multiple HP anymore, so in addition to having no shields, they have no additional HP. So they are pretty much the ultimate glass cannon. The Nurad Windblades do, but again, there are very few of them. And I'm trying to sort of avoid the ranged fire, so I think what JMonster intended to do here was to try and sort of outlast my harassment with the cavalry, and with his ranged fire he can certainly do that. You know, if my Windblades and my Brotherhood of the Lance get focused down too heavily, things are going to go very badly for me. I'm going to try and go in here. You can see that several Windblades are falling as I go through here, so again, this is expensive cavalry that I am losing. But you can see that his other war chariots are over here now, so I'm going to send in my Windblades and hopefully send in my Brotherhood of the Lance just in behind. If I can deal with all of his chariots, that really takes away a really powerful tool that you could use against my infantry. If you look over into the distance, you can see more of my cavalry cycling around, my nomadic scouts. And actually you can see here that these clan warriors are sort of his rear line, his sort of reserve infantry, which are trying to sort of entrap my cavalry and allow his archers to do their work. And then if you look back over here, you can see some of my horse archers have been caught in melee by his clan warriors, which is not where I want to be. I want to be using my ammunition before charging in. And if we look over here, you can actually see that I think some of my retainers were completely destroyed by a combination of archers and clan warriors. If we actually look over to here, you can see that I used my horse archers, engaged them in melee with the archers and just tore through them. I need to get out of there very quickly, however, because his assassin units are here. And I think they cancelled that throw, which is a bit of a shame for them, because now they could have got a lot of kills on those Nurad retainers. But I do need to be careful because there are spears over here. If my retainers get caught in melee with these Loke Scion Rim, things are going to go very, very badly for me. So I'm going to pull them out. And the Nurad retainers, they are pretty durable, but you know, most of Khan's units do favour damage more, the cavalry units in particular. So you can see over there that I'm sort of chasing his horse archers into the corner. You look over here, the Variag mercenary riders have been caught in melee by nomadic scouts. Again, nomadic scouts are not the best in melee, but ultimately most of Khan's forces do have a cav bonus that runes do not. If we go back over to here, we can see that Dragon's Wrath Guildsmen and clan warriors are moving around. And if you look here, you can see my Chieftain's Vanguard has sort of managed to clean up some Variag mercenary riders, but if you'll notice, all of my Brotherhood of the Lance and Nurad Windblades have been destroyed by ranged fire. So again, they are very vulnerable to that ranged fire, and ultimately using them as aggressively as I did was maybe a little bit foolhardy. But ultimately, I still do have quite a lot of cavalry left, and the retainers are still a very, very capable melee cavalry unit. And he doesn't have much to sort of answer that anymore. You know, he's used also a lot of his ammunition on my cavalry, which I'm not too against. Some of my retainers there, considering that a lot of my infantry, particularly my nomadic axemen, are going to be quite weak to ranged fire, very weak in fact. So if I can sort of make it so most of his ammunition is gone in the late game, that's going to be good. You can see over here my nomadic scouts are throwing their axes into these Loke Scion Rim as they crest the hill. Getting a few kills. The Scion Rim are a tough unit, you know, so they're going to be able to withstand some of these lower tier projectiles a little bit better. But considering that these are spearmen, sort of the bane of my existence as Khan, the fact that I'm just managing to get some kills on them is good, and then of course I'm going to retreat. The nomadic scouts cannot fire while moving, so they are, you know, quite difficult to use without them being shot, particularly with these Variag mercenaries all over the place. And you can see now what I'm going to do. You know, I've got these Nurad retainers, and pretty much all of my cavalry is concentrated in this ball over here, apart from the horse archers you see over there in the background, sort of harassing those clan warriors. So I'm going to try and get my cavalry into a ball and just try and finish off a lot of these weaker units that he's got back here. So you can see, unfortunately for me, one of my Nurad retainers, I did order all of my cavalry to go this way, but they decided to charge headlong into Dragon's Wrath Guildsmen and clan warriors. So unfortunately that means they break almost immediately to that elite infantry. The infantry engagement is yet to happen. You can see these Dragon's Wrath Guildsmen. We haven't actually seen any of the throwing knives yet. Most of the time you can see actually that the Dragon's Wrath Guildsmen, the way they hold their swords is quite neat. They've got sort of, some of them are holding them sort of both backwards. Again, they've been given a visual overhaul as well. As soon as they sort of get into a nice position, we can take a look at them. But you can see that what I'm trying to do is, I'm trying to avoid his more elite infantry at the front, and I'm trying to sort of pick off these stragglers, try and deny him some numbers. Because ultimately, in terms of infantry, he did obviously bring a lot more than me. And I'm going to need to sort of do something about that, because if it turns into a situation where he's got more infantry than me into the late game, he's going to just be able to surround me, and then Khan's infantry morale is very poor, so they're going to be able to just defeat me like that. The Nerniag Horse Archers still firing, just getting a few pot shots off, but ultimately they are being sort of targeted down by the Khandish skirmishes, the runic skirmishes as well. You can see that at this point, really, it's just been my cavalry trying to sort of pick away at his army, and him trying to sort of paper over the cracks that the cavalry is leaving. Having said that, most of the damage I've done, aside from the chariots are quite a high-profile target, but the horse archers and these Estron clan warriors, they're not really the most high-tier units at all. So primarily what I've done is I've taken away quite a lot of his lower-tier units, but it has cost me a lot. It's cost me my Brotherhood of the Lance and Windblades, which are very expensive. It's cost me several other units of cavalry as well. It's cost me, I think, 1 unit of my axe throwers. It's cost me a unit of my retainers as well. So a lot of my cavalry has been sort of expended trying to deal with this, and whether that's going to be worth it in the late game remains to be seen. Having said that, he does have, that flag rim is going to be quite difficult to break down. Having said that, the Nurad footmen are AP in melee. I don't think the flag rim are anymore, but the Nurad footmen have also got very low base attack and very low skill. So against the elves in particular, the Nurad footmen are going to be a pretty bad choice, I would imagine. At least I think that's going to be sort of the intention there. The Scion Rim are here as well. The Scion Rim are also going to be a bit of a problem for me, because breaking through them is going to be difficult. My cavalry's not going to be able to do it. I don't have any ranged skirmishers on foot, so I'm going to have to sort of rely on my footmen to really pull me out in the melee. You can see over here that unfortunately I also charged in these horse archers first, so defeat seems certain for them. But these retainers are also coming in, and these clan warriors are shaken, and they should break, considering they've already broken once. That should be the end of them. So again, trying to just sort of deny Rune some of their numbers. If we have a look at the percentages of kills, I am ahead at the moment, but you have to remember that my army is smaller because I have a greater concentration of cavalry. So it's going to be interesting to see. I think it is going to come down to the infantry engagement ultimately, and you can see here that this is something that I really didn't want to do, because the assassins there, this is exactly the sort of situation they're going to do really well in. I didn't know where they were, I didn't keep track of them, and this of course means, and now they're going to throw their throwing daggers. You can see that several of my cavalry units are going to fall, so it's like mini javelins, and they have 2 volleys of them, and considering they're a pretty capable infantry unit in and of themselves, that's exactly the sort of thing you want to be using your assassins for. Charging in, didn't know they were there, and right into their jaws. It is a pretty neat concept for a unit as well, particularly for the sort of the Men of the East, because I feel like it gives them an option that would be quite useful, because for the most part a lot of the sort of ambush style factions like Cardolan and Rudauer, whereas the Easterlings, particularly Rune, Rune are Rune didn't really have a lot of in terms of the ambush, so it's nice to have them, nice to give them a little bit of a little something. I'm not sure if the Hashari are going to be the Harad are going to be sort of a similar thing for the Haradrim. It would make sense. It's very much in their vein. You can see over here these Scion Rim. I was actually sort of hitting them with the nomadic scouts throwing axes. So a lot of these Scion Rim actually died, and mostly that was because JMonster didn't notice. But as soon as those Variag mercenaries started shooting at them, they did rout off and break. So now it is going to be, I think my cavalry is going to fall back. So that is sort of phase 1 of the battle. So whether or not my cavalry committing all of my cavalry was worth it remains to be seen. He's got 2 units of Dragon's Wrath Guildsmen. That's going to be difficult to deal with. He still has ammo for his archers as well, which is going to be, again, a bit of a problem for me, because I don't have any ranged presence left aside from my own assassins, but they're sort of close range. So it's going to come down to essentially whether my footmen are going to be able to weather the storm. They are going to be sort of the thing that's going to hold me together here, because my nomadic axemen are just there for numbers. My assassins are going to be sort of trying to go for a high profile target and take them out, and the halberdiers are going to be there to try and hold the line together as well. So this will be a good litmus test of how the footmen do, but ultimately most of Rune's infantry is going to be better than Khan's. I think the footmen and the halberdiers of the Nurad variety are going to be the only sort of exceptions to that rule where they can really mix it with the infantry heavy factions, aside from the elves. Against the elves, Khan would definitely be much better off going for just the pure horse archer focus. I think the lower armour of the elves is going to lead them to struggle quite a bit there, I think. You can see that these nomadic scouts did come back from routing. Again, units returning from routing has been something that's been happening throughout the battle, which is good to see. And they're going to meet up with the rest of my cavalry, so I'm going to form up what I can of my cavalry, just sort of regroup them. You can see that most of them are gone now. Really the only thing I've got left that's got any real muscle. Again, the Chieftain's Vanguard, there's only 10 of them. I've got 46 Nurad retainers though, which is nice to see. So there is the runic sort of defensive position. I'm going to move my men slowly into position because, again, I want to, if I can, I want to sort of bait him into using his ranged ammunition on the Nurad footmen because they're going to be able to resist it far better than any of my other units. Got my halberdiers and my Rudder Shadowblades back there. I'm going to actually put it up to ×2 speed while we all move into position. But yeah, the assassins I think are a good addition. And speaking about Khand in particular, again, usually the sort of faction that Khand are, with horse archers and a lot of micro and a lot of running away, it must be said, they're not really my sort of thing normally. I can see the appeal, though. I can see the appeal. You know, you can see, like, in the background, as soon as Rune's sort of own horse archers and chariots started to fall away, it was a case of me starting to pick off their lower tier units without them being able to do much about it, and that can be quite frustrating if you're up against it. But again, outlasting Khand is a very viable strategy. And again, I think that maybe some really heavy cavalry, stuff like with the Runic Dragon Knight, the Khand are going to struggle a little bit more with their horse archers to deal with them. They're going to have to commit their melee cavalry to that. So there are nuances to this. Khand is not always going to win a horse engagement or a mounted engagement, simply because they're the faction with like the biggest bonuses to horse combat. And I do think Rune have got some pretty nasty answers to them. The chariots in particular, against Khandish infantry, is going to be very, very, very potent. So if we have a look at what JMonster's got left, the Scion Rim are probably going to be a big problem for me. You know, breaking through them is going to be difficult. The amount of damage they can do in return is likely going to be pretty minimal, though. The Flag Rim versus the Footman is likely what this is going to come down to. Two, in the previous patch, very similar units, it must be said. You can see he still has these archers as well, which could well prove to be pretty key. And he's got 2 units of guildsmen. I've only got 1 unit of assassins, and I was trying to sort of save them until the engagement was on, and then I'd run them around the back. I still have my cavalry, but again, how useful they are going to be is debatable, considering they're already under archer fire, and several of my nomadic scouts fell immediately. So it's going to be interesting. Both of us have got sort of armies that have got pretty decent mainline infantry, but JMonster's got the archers and probably the sort of elite infantry because he's still got 2 units of guildsmen, and I've got the cavalry, which I can use to sort of disrupt his formation and maybe get some rear charges. Hammer and anvils, of course, are very, very potent. These guildsmen, I did notice these guildsmen over here, and I'm going to try and sort of get my nomadic axemen around the flank. I'm just going to try and gum them up with some lower tier units so they can't throw their daggers into my more important Nurad footman. You can see that the archers are firing in. The nomadic axemen are obviously going to be very weak to archer fire as I sort of charge in. But again, it's the archers and the throwing daggers. I mean, that's brutal, that is. The unit cut in half in but a moment. You can see that my cavalry is also coming in. The chieftain's vanguard I'm going to send into these clan warriors. He still has a unit of sort of this spare infantry, which I wasn't a big fan of. I thought that was going to be bad for me. You can see that this cavalry over here, I'm going to get a nice rear charge onto the guildsmen so that my axemen don't fold and he can then get some nice rear shots on me. That would be crippling. There goes my general, however. Oh, a headshot on that one clan warrior. You can see that over here, my infantry is going to have the better of it. You know, the fact that I have the axemen supporting my footmen, the flag rim aren't great enough in number to really hold it together. But over here, where my halberds are, I knew I was always going to be stretched quite thin against Khan's infantry. So I was going to send my halberds over here to try and just hold this blob of runic infantry at bay. And I would then send my assassins around this side to try and hold this line together. But it is still very close going into the late game as we go in here. Which Easterlings are the strongest? The Veriags of Khand or the Runic Dragon Worshippers? Again, the Scion Rim are over here in the Flag Rim. Very potent combination. You can see that there's also those guildsmen over there. Again, the Nurad Halberds are a cool addition as well because they give Khand, they make Khand not entirely reliant on the footman to have a unit that can hold for a little while. Sort of the Mongolian style halberdier. Going to get them into combat. And again, they're just here to hold. Like, I don't expect this part of the line to win for me. Rune's infantry is better and I am outmatched. Over here, however, where I've got the numbers advantage, I am going to win. You know, the Veriag mercenaries have been committed to melee, but they're not going to be enough. You can see over here that the Scion Rim have held out a little bit better, but they ultimately probably don't have the numbers to deal with this either. The rear charges I've got onto the Dragon's Wrath Guildsmen have also made it so that they're too weak to really be too effective now. I mean, the nomadic axemen, it says victory seems certain for them actually. And again, I think that's because of the charges. You can see I still have these Neurad retainers as well. I'm going to charge into these Variag mercenaries, although my cavalry is now weak enough to the point where if I charge into a full unit like this, they're probably going to lose. So ultimately my cavalry is now just a distracting measure. You can see over here. The throwing knives, they're being arced over, which I'm not sure if that sort of affects their power or not, but they are still managing to get more kills on my Neurad halberdiers. And you can see now it's time for my own assassins to come forward, my Brotherhood Shadowblades. And now it's going to be a showdown, although to be honest with you, because my assassins are fresh and have got more ammunition, it's not really a fair test, so I think that I'm probably going to have the beating of the Dragon's Wrath Guildsmen here, but they are very similar units and they fulfill the same role. And also they're probably going to get the first volley on me, because obviously I was running into their zone of influence rather than the other way around. So you can see that's a pretty lethal volley there, but I will respond in kind. Obviously these units, they're intended to be lighter units, so I would imagine against sort of ranged fire, especially quite potent ranged fire, because I think the daggers are basically javelins, only, you only have 2 volleys of them if your unit is full. Obviously it does change if you lose some men in the unit, so ammunition is kind of a strange one. You can see over here that the runic infantry is starting to buckle my halberds. Again, the halberds were only really supported by 1 unit of footmen, which does mean their formation is going to break. Spear wall is not going to be enough. But over here you can see that I have won this engagement pretty handily over here. The support of my cavalry rear charging into Jmonster's lines has led to the footmen and the nomadic axemen being victorious, so I am going to have more infantry to sort of pour into the fight over here. And you can see also that my assassins were victorious, but I think they did use up all of their ammunition and they did lose nearly half their unit, so again, both assassins sort of cancelling each other out again. The masked men going into battle, trying to sort of hold, because again this is really Rune's only real spot of resistance now, this real big blob of infantry. So if I can just sort of close the jaws over here, things are going to be pretty good for me. Having said that, I only have 3 units of footmen left. The nomadic axemen are probably not going to be too deadly, like they are AP I think. And indeed. And they are, obviously higher damage, because I did once against Rune. And they are a decent lower tier unit, but they're probably not going to be very good against Flagrim and Scion Rim, so this isn't all over just yet, but it definitely is in my favour at this point. I still have some halberds, but they just routed off. My cavalry did charge in, but unfortunately it was directly into Scion Rim, so a bit of a misjudgment, a bit of an error of judgment there on my part. You can see over here that my footmen have come in. And I have to say, in terms of my army, the 2 star performers, while I was playing, I thought were my general's unit. The Chieftain's Vanguard were very, very good. They managed to get a lot of kills on a lot of lower tier units, and they held together very well. The Shadowblades, again, I think the Shadowblades were decent, but again, I only used them late on. If I used them earlier on, they probably would have been a more solid fixture in my army, but really they were the thing that just sort of allowed me to finish off Jmonster's assassins. So I'm, maybe I didn't show them off as well as I could have done, but again, I feel as though with a Khandish army, you have to kind of save these guys to the end, because being overly aggressive is going to lead to you dying more often than not, because your infantry will probably fall apart quicker than most other factions. Even the Orcs, I think, because of their numbers, might hold together better than Khand. I mean, the footmen are really the only exception to that rule. And here go the footmen. The footmen still being AP is a really big boon for Khand. Again, they have very low base attack. I think they only have 3 base attack. But that AP is really going to come in handy against human factions, the dwarves and the orcs. Again, against the elves I wouldn't bring them, I don't think. I think that would be a very poor choice considering the pretty high lack of skill and base stats they have, but even so. Yeah, I would say the Neurad footmen really pulled this out for me in the late game. I think that if my infantry hadn't done as well, I would have thought that my cavalry... the cavalry, I think, as well, the early game did go in my favour just a little bit. I feel as though if Jmonster had been able to shut down my cavalry a little bit more effectively... Again, I think in this situation, instead of chariots, if he had gone for the Dragon Knights and the Runic Bodyguard, I don't think I would have done very well at all. Because those Runic Cavalry units are pretty lethal. But as we move in here, you can see that there goes the Runic General at the hands of the Chieftain's Vanguard. So yeah, this is really just a matter of finishing this match up at this point. The Brotherhood Shadowblades But this was a good match. I enjoyed this. Again, usually I don't enjoy playing as factions like Khan, because like I said, you know, running away and sort of beating around the bush, as it were, isn't really my style of play. I prefer a lot more direct, which is, or sort of forcing the enemy to come to you, that sort of thing. So maybe the dwarves or something like that. Maybe even Isengard and Gundabad is more my cup of tea. But I have to say, I did enjoy this. I enjoyed playing as Khan to their strengths when I sort of took a look at them, because obviously we played 2 battles, I got crushed. I got a little bit disheartened about it. I was like, okay, I need to sort of get involved with the stats a little bit more. I need to have a look at sort of what's up with them. And sort of looking at the way they play, I can imagine that some people will find them quite annoying to face, simply because there goes the replay has finished, because I think it was an admit defeat, because it was, I think one of the runic units was in the corner that didn't break, so if we just exit the battle, we won't actually get to see the kills, but I can say that my Chieftain's Vanguard got the most kills for me, and the Nurad footmen performed quite well as well. So I can imagine that Khand would be quite annoying to face for some people, simply because they are so sort of horse archer heavy, and sort of trying to deal with them, it's like playing whack-a-mole, you know, trying to sort of deal with the horse archers wherever they pop up and start spraying down your men. But you do have to sort of bear in mind, horse archers for the most part are quite fragile compared to sort of their contemporaries. So like the Nerniag horse archers are a bit of an exception to that. They are a pretty solid mainline horse archer unit, and obviously the elite horse archers are much more sort of survivable than their lower tier counterparts. But I do feel as though that Khand do run the risk of, against certain factions, of sort of being outlasted. Like if your horse archers are sort of made completely ineffective, then you don't really have much else. Like in this situation, the Nurad footmen did a big job for me and managed to sort of go toe to toe with the runic infantry. But even so, I do feel as though Khand, you know, if you like micro, you know, they are the faction for you. Them and Rohan are going to be very, very difficult to deal with if you know how to use the horse archers correctly. And obviously, you know, I'm not the best player in the world. I know that. I'm pretty mediocre, to be honest with you. But again, I feel as though it's an interesting matchup, because Rune have got a lot of shields. They've got a lot of heavy cavalry themselves. Like again, like I've said, even the best Khandish horse archers are going to struggle to make a dent in the runic bodyguard and the dragon knights. But again, the Khandish melee cavalry then comes into its own. So again, cavalry-focused players are going to really enjoy Khand. Obviously, if you don't like facing off against cavalry, then you're going to hate facing Khand. But yeah, big thanks to JMonster for sort of playing along and putting up with how mediocre I am. But yeah, he deserves a lot of credit, so I will obviously leave a link to his channel in the description below, because I think that without him, the development and the sort of the testing of the stats and the mod moving forward probably would have stalled out a little while ago, and that would have been heartbreaking. So a big thanks to him, and hopefully I'll get more involved with it sort of going forwards as well, because I do feel as though I've been a little bit inactive in the community, and I do feel kind of bad about that. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.